Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending today's webinar, How to Plan a Product Launch in a Virtual-Friendly World, presented by Lore.io. I'm Jennifer Seaton, and I'll be moderating this webinar. Our speakers today are Janardan Prasad, CBO and Head of Life Sciences at Lore.io, Nick Holsman, Head of Commercial Operations, U.S. Business Unit at Oncopeptides, and Gautam Kollu, Chief Commercial Officer at GRAIL. You can read their full bios on the left side of your window by selecting the Speakers tab. Just a few technical notes before we begin. The webcast is being streamed through your computer, so there's no dial-in number. For the best audio quality, please make sure your volume is up. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand within 24 hours after the event. Time permitting, we will follow the presentation with a question and answer session. Please submit your questions using the questions and answer tab on the left side of your screen. Okay, now let's begin. Nick and Gautam, can you tell us a bit about upcoming product launches? More specifically, have your product launch strategies changed as a result of the pandemic?
Certainly, I can go first there. So coming from a small company based in Sweden, Oncopeptides has a launch coming up February 28th is our PDUFA date, launching a product in multiple myeloma. So working with the law team over the last 8 months, we've been looking at new strategies of bringing analytics to our field-based teams in real time, and they've been a fantastic partner in reaching those KPIs and changing those KPIs as the pandemic has taken hold of the industry. Gautam?
I can go next. We are a company that's focused on the early detection of cancer, and so we are in the diagnostic space, and we're following up on the biological insight of there being free-floating DNA in the blood. Later this year, in the summer, we will be launching Gallery, which is a blood-based test to look for 50-plus cancers. Our initial focus for the launch is in the US. And here, certainly, the pandemic has affected us in how and where we connect with customers, and also in how and where customers get their information. So the pandemic's affected both those dimensions. As folks know, conferences have gone virtual, in-person visits and in-service detailing has been curtailed, and on and on. And in many ways, then the pandemic has forced us to make sure that our launch strategy is very, very targeted at every level of execution, from our marketing mix, from the types of customers we focus on, the call planning that we do, the anchor customers that we pursue, etc.
Okay. Janardan, since you work with multiple life science companies, tell us how much the life science world has moved virtual.
That's a very interesting question. I would say almost everything has moved virtual. Let me put some numbers before I start explaining. Earlier, till 2019, most of the meetings between the reps on the field and the physicians were happening in person. Those meetings have gone down by 73%. And when we look across our customers, we see that most of those meetings are happening virtually. In fact, to everyone's surprise, the number of video calls between physicians and the reps have gone up by almost 800%. This is based on some data that Viva published recently. The second thing, let's talk about marketing. In marketing, what we have seen is the digital engagement has gone to a whole different level. Since the events are not happening in person, a lot of conferences are happening virtually. The engagement in those conferences have gone up. And I think the most surprising part for us was that the email volumes have gone up by almost 7 to 8x. And not just the email volume, but the open rates have also gone up, because physicians, these account owners, they are more open to reading the emails, and because there is no in-person meeting that's happening. Lastly, I would say when we did another event, and this is more from Lore.io, that works with a lot of life sciences companies who are about to launch a drug. We did an event with Fierce Biotech during the JPMV, and the participation that we saw from so many life sciences companies across the globe, it was like surprising. Like for my marketing team, for my leadership team, the response was overwhelming. People were willing to engage in the virtual meetings. I made some good connects there. When we sent an follow-up email, the open rate was like almost like 50%, which I've never seen in my career. So overall, I would say a lot of people have accepted and adopted to the virtual modes of communication. And my guess is that most of these changes might persist even post-pandemic as well.
So on that note, Gautam, do you foresee the shift to virtual being permanent or just temporary? In other words, will these changes stick post-pandemic?
I mean, as with most things, it depends. There is yes or no, I would say. Will these changes stick? Some will. Customers are now a lot more comfortable with information consumption patterns that didn't exist before the pandemic. Similar to just how all of us have gotten used to doing jobs or large parts of our jobs while remote from home and have realized that this works too. You don't need to be in an office to do it. Doctors, HCPs have gotten used to care delivery without the full gamut of in-person, face-to-face interactions that they used to have. So people are relying more and more, like Janardan just said, on things like Zoom webinars, on telemedicine for the delivery of care across state lines. And what we've seen, and this is not just specific to us at GRAIL, we've heard this from other colleagues in the industry, that a majority of buyers and sellers, whether you're looking at B2B or you're looking at direct to physician, they now prefer digital self-serve for the consumption of information. They prefer, oddly enough, remote human engagement because this is something that they find is sort of efficient, that they can do outside their regular work hours. And safety is one reason, of course, in the pandemic time, and that's going to go away, hopefully, once we get through the vaccinations. But self-serve and remote interactions have really made it easier for people to get information, to arrange for service. In that sense, this is going to continue. The effect of the pandemic is going to continue. Few people say that they're going to return to how things were before the pandemic in terms of in-person sales, even in sectors where the predominant go-to-market approach has been dominated by field sales or in-person selling. Pharmaceuticals is a great example of that. But people will still need to transact, and the highest priority relationships, the highest priority customers, especially in B2B, that will still be done face-to-face. That will still be done on the marketing side using account-based marketing. If you're going to make an enterprise-level bet as a buyer, you really want to know who are the people you're dealing with. So that I don't think is going to change, but there will be many, many facets of how we commercialize in healthcare that have changed because of the pandemic, and that's going to endure well after we get through this pandemic.
So obviously the shift to virtual has had a positive impact on how companies are currently handling limited access to physicians, accounts, and even in-person meetings. Nick, could you elaborate on how this has benefited your organization?
Yeah, certainly. So I think that as long as you're flexible as an organization, trying to meet your customers where they can possibly meet with you, whether that's virtually, in person, a lot of the conferences are not in person anymore, but as long as you're flexible to use the platforms that they're willing to use, whether it's Teams or Zoom, and that's something that us as a company have tried to do. Initially, we went down the route of being a Teams only company. However, as we understood that various prescribers and KOLs didn't want to go down that route, they wanted to use Zoom, they wanted to use other mechanisms, to speak with our field teams, that we had to make a change and pivot. So, I think one of the keys to having more of a digital relationship with our stakeholders out there is the ability to capture that information, to turn it into insights quickly, and also to know that there has to be flexibility across the nation. So certain areas of the country are going to open up quicker. Certain areas of the country, there's going to be face-to-face as opposed to virtual. And we have to be willing to be able to provide support for field-based representatives for all of those different customers to gain insights, to turn them around, and push those through the organization so that we can start working on those and making key decisions, as soon as possible.
So Janardan, with everything going virtual, one would assume that launch strategies would benefit from immediate access to data generated from interactions. Just how important is real-time access to data and ability to glean insights quickly to improve interactions with clients and patients?
Extremely important, I would say. So earlier, if you look at the world before everything went virtual, let's say a team member, let's pick Oncopeptides, an Oncopeptides team member will sit on the field with a KOL or a physician, and there is a lot of emotional connect, there's a lot of in-person connect, and there's a lot of insights that you get when you are with that KOL or with that physician, right? Now, just because you're not meeting in person, you have to fill in for that lack of personal connect or lack of that emotional connect. And I would say the only way that companies are able to do that is through the right level of insights, the right data analysis that we have, because the attention span is limited. Let's say I'm a physician and I'm giving 30 minutes to someone on Zoom. People want to learn. So that means you have to give them the right insight, be it about awareness for a disease or be it about some new kind of diagnostic test that's coming. So it has to be very, very data driven, right? And data also, when we share that data with physicians or KOLs, it can't be an outdated data. Let's say we are sharing something that was 1 month back, it was valid, but we are not sharing the latest results that we received from, let's say, some other studies, or we are not talking about the recent trends that have changed over the last month or two, then I think we will lose credibility in the market. So it's very, very important to have real-time insights to embrace those interactions and to make it very productive for physicians and KOLs. And to be able to give these real-time insights, I think companies have to have the right platform. Companies have to have the right infrastructure to give high-quality data. In fact, most of the companies currently are not able to give real-time insights because of certain data quality issues. Because of that, data scientists spend a lot of time cleaning up the data, and the data is delayed by a week or two. And because of that, it could cost a company a lot. Maybe someone is talking to a physician, and just because that person did not have the recent data about the kind of patients that particular physician is seeing, maybe you lost that opportunity. In fact, there was a study by Gartner where they said that in absence of real-time, high-quality data, you are annually, on an average, these life sciences companies are losing almost $15 million opportunity just by not having good quality and real-time data insights. So it is extremely important to have real-time data to make these virtual interactions very, very productive.
So now that real-time data insights are a reality, Gautam, how does that change the way business teams, such as marketing or sales, for example, approach data management?
Yeah, I think it really makes a big difference, right? So just as an example, in marketing, content consumption is up now because everyone's working from home. So marketeers are generating more content, generating more videos, and using that to be able to pitch their messages. You need data to be able to target this content. You don't need data management to generally generate the content, but to be able to target the content and manage the distribution of it. That's just not possible unless you have the right data management strategy and the right tools in place to do data management. You also need data management to be able to monitor what's effective and what's not. You're a marketeer, you put out content, you've distributed it well. How you want to figure out how you're going to optimize your investment and how you're going to tweak your marketing spend. And again, there, data becomes more important. I think generally speaking, what you're hearing me say, what you're hearing anybody else who might speak about this say is marketing now is becoming more and more emphasized on digital marketing, and the underlying basis for anything you do in digital marketing really is data and data management. You'll see a similar shift in sales too, by the way, sales or just revenue generation. Remote engagements have been quite successful. You can use those not just for prospecting, as people have done in the past, but also for actual selling. And here what's happened is, it's been quite revelatory how effective video can be to be able to sell a new prospect who you may not have spent a whole lot of time with before. And again, the ability to engage via video and then figure out who you go after from a commercialization standpoint is going to be heavily impacted by how you manage the data around it. So yeah, it makes a difference to have good data management and to have good analytics in place to execute on your sales and marketing approaches.
So I can see this having a huge impact on improving patient interaction. Nick, can you describe how Oncopeptides have taken advantage of real-time access to data when it comes to handling touch points when access is limited?
Yeah, I think that, prior sort of 5-7 years back, patient level data, there was a lag time of 40, 45 days. You'd have to query it. It was quite unwieldy to use. Right now with in healthcare with projects such as tokenization, we can start mapping different data sets. We can start using data from our own vendors like our hub or copay card data to find where the patient is coming into care, meet them at that site of care. We could start using predictive analytics to sort of understand if an event has occurred in their background, as well as what we can do with some of this patient level data. As long as you've got the right engine behind it, you start building cohorts of patients, like looking at why a certain group of patients acts a certain way, why certain prescribers may act a certain way. Again, it's predictive and it will sort of lead you to a potential answer, but we're getting so much quicker at bringing these big data sets together, mapping them and coming out with true insights pretty close to real time, really actionable insights.
So Janardan, how is Lore.io and other self-serve technologies making it easier for business teams such as sales and marketing to be more agile with real-time insights?
That's a very good question. Let me give an analogy here, right? So, and I'll maybe for a minute take a break from life sciences discussion, and I'll go to the world of driving, right? Imagine going back to the old world where you had the maps, you had the destination, and you have to reach somewhere. There's a plan, there's a destination. That means there's a clear goal, but there's no real-time traffic information, right? That means you can't make decisions based on data about which route to take. I think if you go back to that world, which was the case, like let's say 5-10 years back, I think most of us will be running late for our meetings, right? Now, what technology has done, like let's talk about Google Maps and all the traffic data that we get in near real time. It gives us real-time information, not based on just historical data. It gives us real-time information based on there's an accident on one highway, there is a traffic signal that's not working on a particular alternate route. And if you give these insights to the driver, which in this case is trying to reach a destination, that person can decide which route to take and not to take based on the real-time traffic information. Now let's come back to the life sciences world. In life sciences world, traditionally, and sales and marketing, and maybe Gautam and Nick can talk more about that with their experience, there were two things, right? One is that there was historical evidence of what works, what does not work, for which there was a lot of reference data available. And then there is a goal, there's a plan, there's a forecast to be met by the sales team, for example, the commercial team, right? So we have a future path, which is the forecast. We have the past evidence, which is, let's say, the historical evidence. But what the teams did not have on the field was the real-time data and the power to make decisions based on that data, right? So to be agile, to be able to, let's say, make these interactions very effective, what they need to do is they need to first have access to the data in real time, which I think I already covered in the previous point. Second is that they should be able to do ad hoc analysis on the fly. So imagine like a rep on a call with a physician, and physician has a question, right? I don't think the rep can afford to say that I'll get back to you next week. I think that person should be able to do it pretty well. Second scenario, like again, like a very, very typical scenario, you're going to talk to someone, but you get some insight or some alert, maybe based on the recent activities around that area or around that account, right? Now you should be able to prepare for that meeting. You should be able to pull the reports that you want without being dependent on an analyst or a data engineer or a third-party consultant. You should be able to do that on your own to be able to better prepare for the meeting, which is happening in real time, and to be able to get the most out of that interaction. So I think sales and marketing people are getting more and more creative with these self-serve technologies. They're getting more and more creative once they are empowered. And I get amazed with the way, these real experts in their domain, someone from oncology, someone from immunology, once they are empowered with the self-serve technology, once they are empowered with the insights, and once they are empowered to do the ad hoc analysis, they're able to make so much impact on the field, and they are able to make so much impact for the company and the patients that they're serving. It's pretty powerful.
So this means that a lot of business questions can now be answered in-house without depending on third parties. Nick, can you confirm and elaborate?
Yeah, I think that, we're, as a startup, you've only got limited budget, right? So, everything, the way that sort of commercial leaders do look at data and analytics, it's one budget as a whole. So you've got to have trade-offs, whether you pay for a basic study like a Salesforce sizing, an alignment project, or a patient journey, or whether you spend that money on a data purchase, or if you spend that money on infrastructure. So I think that that's something from a smaller company you've got to think about. So what you've got to also determine is what can be brought in-house. Like if you were to bring a data and reporting tool, can you, if you've got some reasonably savvy analysts in-house, they can use these tools to create complex queries to answer those business questions very quickly. Like before, if you're looking at a patient journey, that's a 8-week project, and a lot of the time it's a heavy lift from a small company, and there's a lot of questions at the end of the day. So I think having a platform that can crank the data to answer those questions on the fly is very important. The other key that some of the self-service options are giving you is not having to invest in data engineers and IT people. So instead of, because a lot of the infrastructure that helps to maintain this would be provided by another team outside the organization. So in terms of headcounts, you can start investing in people who really know the data, the business user, as opposed to an IT infrastructure around the system.
It seems like the pandemic has forced the life science industries to adopt new enabling technologies, some of which have already been adopted by other industries, and the result has been extremely positive. Gautam, can the life science industry benefit from additional best practices already in play in other high-tech related industries?
Yeah, I believe so. I think what you're asking was about cross-industry fertilization of ideas. And, Janardan had this point about how salespeople are now using a lot of self-serve technologies. I think really as a healthcare field, generally speaking, I'm always mystified by how much we can learn from other industries, not just from high-tech industries, but from other regulated industries. Just to give you an example, I think a great example especially on the marketing side, is attitudinal profiling. The customers that we serve are not monolithic. It's not like every doctor is the same as every other doctor in their specialty. Just to take an example of HCPs. But in healthcare, we seem to treat all of them as the same. We hire these bright MBAs straight out of school and seem to promptly tell them to forget the basics of marketing, such as segmentation, which really is a task that's built around data that other industries have done all the time. And a great example of that might be financial services, highly regulated industry, just like healthcare, very thoughtful in how they identify and pursue their customer base. Another example Going back to Janardan's thing about self-serve, the deep qualification and automation of sales processes that you see in tech, especially with SaaS companies, again, something for us to learn from. I think more and more companies are learning it, especially as you think about these, the likes of Salesforce.com and other tools that are available. They are pretty much standard, DG or standard here. But there's things we can learn in how they are implemented and how they're automated that can be brought over from the tech side over to healthcare.
Janardan, how can companies like Lore.io bridge the gap between other industries and life sciences?
As Gautam said, and I think Nick emphasized that point as well, if you empower the business users, you see miracles happening, right? And to empower the business users, companies like Lore.io is just one such company, but there are a lot of other companies trying to do it. They are trying to productize the things that have not been productized yet, and especially in life sciences industry. There's a lot of things that are repetitive but still being done manually, and for that, companies go outside and then they invest a lot in terms of time and money. So there's an opportunity to productize it, and Lore.io is doing that. So I think that's very interesting. Gautam also mentioned very important point about I think the cross-pollination of ideas, and with that, let me explain. I'm a big believer of cross-pollination. Before Lore.io, I was running a technology startup that was in the field of transportation, and before starting that company, I was building products for payments, right? So when I switched from payment space, which is the financial space, to the transportation startup of my own, imagine a Uber kind of startup, I learned a lot from payments industry, and then I applied those in terms of real-time payments, on-demand service in the transportation world, right? Similarly, when I switched to Lore.io, I realized, and with life sciences, I realized that there are a lot of things where it could be done on demand, right? So what we need is a cross-pollination of ideas across industries. I gave an example of learning from payments, applied in transportation, applied in life sciences. Similarly, Lore.io founder DV comes from retail and e-commerce background, and then he was the chief architect at Walmart Labs, and he has amazing examples of how they were making use of data to give the right service to the customer, to make it better for suppliers, to make sure that each and every footfall in the store is worth the trip to Walmart. And there are many examples, right? And with that, let me make a bold claim and bold statement. I think every industry needs an outsider to disrupt it. It's a combination of an industry expert like Gautam, like Nick, and an outsider like me and DV from Lore.io to innovate together. There are problems in life sciences where I think people have the deep domain expertise, and there are companies like Lore.io who have a deep understanding of data, AI, ML, predictive learning, modeling. There are so many ways that we can put it all together and really build a SaaS product for life sciences so that companies don't reinvent the data management and data analytics problems that have been solved and could already be productized. I think this is a big opportunity for companies like Lore.io, not just Lore.io. I would say that there are many such companies, whoever is productizing it, breaking down into smaller pieces, solving the end business problem that will have a huge impact in terms of providing the right care to the patient, giving the right information to the physician, and as an outcome, making the drug launch successful. There's a long way to go, and Lore.io would definitely work with companies who are early adopters for this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to really thank you all for joining us and sharing your expertise with all of us. Now I'd like to move on to the question and answer. There is still time to submit your questions using the Q&A tab to the left of your screen. We have a lot of great questions already, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. Okay, our first question I'm going to throw to Janardan. The question is, how do we do a better job engaging around virtual congresses now?
Very, very interesting questions. I would say there are two important aspects to it. To have a better engagement, we need two things. We need to do the right targeting. That means when we are targeting these HCPs or we are targeting these people, the targeting has to be very precise based on what you want to do. That's one, for which I think data plays a very important role. Second is the prep that goes during the event, like during the conversation, right? There, I think it has to be very insightful. And the way to prepare for that, I would speak from data side, is we have to know what's trending, what topics are trending amongst those specialists, what topics are not trending, what kind of interactions are seeing more repeat discussions and better prescription trends, what kind of discussions are not. And to do that, I think companies have to analyze all the previous conversations. The companies have to analyze all the recent conversations and build a map, build a trend of what's working, what interactions, we can have better engagement here.
Great. Sorry, we lost you for a little bit there, but you're back now. Okay. Our next question, Nick. Are companies valuing rep or marketers relationship currency more so now if they can get HCP engagements? And how do you keep this talent in the exploding biotech environment?
Yeah, that's a good question, because we're all in the same situation, with trying to retain talent. It's not as if, someone's going to leave our organization and go to another organization who's going to put them in a differing situation with COVID and access and things along those lines. We certainly, we're a company built around the science, but people are front and center in our organization, and making sure that we keep those people and keep good people engaged. I think that we brought on a team and built a team who have got the experience in multiple myeloma, who know those providers and HCPs, and who are willing to work with those people, at whatever site to get those engagements. So whether that's virtually, whether that's in person, obviously this is going to change over time, but certainly, what we've tried to do is give them the flexibility and the tools to be successful in their roles. For example, one thing that has changed, is capturing interactions, whether a phone call is now an interaction or whether a virtual call is the same value as a face-to-face call. And certainly with today's, situation with COVID, we're looking at them all the same. As long as they've got touch points with those important HCPs and KOLs who will help get the message out, we'll be supporting our sales team and our marketing team.
Great. So Nick, I'm going to also throw this question to you. The question is, we're an early stage organization that is about to kickstart the planning of our launch. How do you overcome the challenges associated with limited budget and resources to gain access to these virtual technologies to help plan your launch?
Yeah, I think for any small organization, I think that, I've been at 3 startups now. I think one thing you've got to do is be realistic with the budget. There's no use, coming into a budget meeting, 3 months before launch and tell them that a patient data set is going to cost $200,000. I think you need to educate people on, data infrastructure is expensive. You need to, if you want to build, that infrastructure for growth and for long term, it is going to cost you a little bit of money. However, you can go for some non-traditional, routes to get the most out of that data. So I think that, one thing is very important is getting all your stakeholders involved, whether that's nurse educators, market access, marketing group, sales, ensuring that you're buying one set of data that can be utilized across all the different organizations. And then when it comes to some of the virtual platforms, I think probably 9 months ago, things like Viva Engage, the ROI in there was probably still out there. Some of these virtual platforms, we couldn't measure whether they were successful or not. Now there's no alternative. It's basically, if you want to reach the HCPs you want to get into those institutions which are closed right now, you have to use Teams, you have to use Zoom, you have to invest in Engage. So it's kind of one of those things that now this is if you want to reach those customers, it's something you have to invest in. And again, being forthright with senior leadership to tell them what the cost of that is, the time to implementation, and buying flexible options. I think that's the key to success here.
Great. So next question is, how exactly will the role of sales representatives look like in the future? What will be the most important new skills, especially with respect to data sciences? Are new roles required for sales forces? Gautam, can you speak to that?
Certainly. I think we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that at the end of the day, businesses thrive or survive based on how well they can delight a customer. That's not going to change. And, the number one thing for any salesperson, whether that's a rep, a manager, anybody else, is to have that intimacy with the customer's needs and how your product or your offering can help them. So does that really change? No, that fundamental aspect doesn't change. However, the tools that you have to do that with are going to change. Some of the skills that you have to use are going to change. And I think what this pandemic has shown us beyond a doubt is that the ability to engage with a customer in asynchronous forms of communication as opposed to purely face-to-face is going to become more and more important. I don't think that necessarily means that you need to change your sales force. Like 15 years ago, we didn't have salesforce.com. Now everybody uses salesforce.com. These tools have just become, day-to-day things that people use. Similarly, there'll be new tools that will are popping up, which enable this asynchronous mode of communication that sales forces will get used to and will become more familiar in integrating in their day-to-day. There was also a question about, are new roles needed within the sales force? Again, the core of the sales force role, which is, delight a customer, isn't going to change. I don't think you need to change the roles within the sales force. However, if you take a slightly broader view of commercial operations, yes, you probably do need people in your commercial operations team who are far more data forward or data centric, given the world that we live in. But the sales force in and of itself, I don't think it changes. You continue to prize people who have the agility to learn new tools as they become available.
Mm-hmm. Okay, our next question is, my commercial launch is 2 years away, so we don't need commercial analytics right now. But I have a few business questions around launch strategy for which I mostly depend on external consultants. How can Lore.io answer these questions for me? Janardan, could you respond?
Sure. I think this is the part that is changing, right? So earlier companies had to build like huge infrastructure, huge data platform to be able to answer business questions, right? But now they don't have to. Like there are SaaS products available. Again, like Lore.io is one such product where they don't have to build a huge infrastructure. If they have a business questions around what is my market size, how should I target, how should I segment the market, what kind of patient journey I have, and let's say they want to do it based on, let's say, claims data, right? So the moment they get claims data, there are tools available. Like for example, like they can use Lore.io product for that. They can upload the claims data. A business user can upload the claims data and get all the insights and all the business questions answered without building a huge infrastructure, and also without going to a third-party consultant, without being dependent on anyone else. A lot of these questions could be answered by just playing around with the data, using the right product, and answering the business questions in out. Not just once. I keep emphasizing this to my prospects, to my customers, to my partners, that these are not one-time questions. These are the questions that you ask yourself, and your team keeps asking these questions every month. And every time you ask this question, maybe the answer will change depending upon data and the market conditions. Yeah, so even though your commercial launch is 2 years away, if there are any business questions that could be answered using data, I think Lore.io could do that without you investing huge in the data platform or the infrastructure.
Okay. Our next question is, what about using consultants that are experts in the market? Gautam, can you speak to that?
And I mean, look, the way I approach it is, if you made the decision that you want to use a consultant, then obviously you want to go with somebody who has some domain knowledge and therefore has some expertise. What you don't want to do is revert to a, a mode of thinking where, well, here's a person who's worked in the market for years, and therefore the playbook that worked in the past is what you want to employ in the future. You really want to think hard about what it is that your product or your service has that's differentiated and how you're going to use that. And often I find there's a reversion to, let's use an expert because he or she has done it in the past and they can use the same playbook again. I mean, what you ought to do really is think about, what's unique to you, and do that in a way that really builds on the information that you have about your customers or your own offering.
Great. So our next question is, what role does personalization of data analytics tools play in daily work? Gautam, could you answer that?
Yeah, I'm happy to, with the caveat that, the company that I'm at right now, GRAIL, like I said before in this call, we are about to launch, so we haven't yet launched. However, these tools and the idea of personalization of data goes two ways. I would say two broad ways. At a marketing level, I think what it's allowed us to do now is get a whole lot better at lead gen than we used to be before. And we have a B2B model to start with in terms of what we are doing for our early detection of cancer test. So that's one direction, marketing. The other direction, which is around personalization of data, really relates to the sales team. And we talk a lot about coverage planning for our sales team and how that's going to be mapped out. And that's again one where, to the extent that you have a couple of layers down of data to dig in territory, it really helps you map it better. Those are just two ways that I've seen it used. I mean, there's probably other ways too. And maybe Nicholas has something to add to that.
Yeah, I could add a thought there as well. As certainly the way that we've looked at data is we always we don't buy aggregated data. We buy it at the lowest possible level. Whether that's at the patient level or above, and then we basically branch that out to wherever the different functional leads want to take that data. But certainly in terms of personalization, the way that we've built our data warehouse with Laura's help here is we bring in those data sets. We ask what are the KPIs for the various functional leads. We look at where those KPIs may be changing as the launch goes on, and then we build out those metrics, and we really personalize each of those dashboards for each of the various teams. For now, knowing that it may change in 6 weeks, in 6 months. So certainly being able to buy the data at the lowest possible level, and have a powerful engine to really crank the data and cut the data, certainly allows to personalize and move your analytics in whichever way the market or the timing allows you to.
Great. Okay. We have one more time for one more question. So we've had a lot of great questions today. Unfortunately, we couldn't get to them all, but we will try to do our best to get back to everyone who submitted a question personally after the webinar. So our last question is, would you say your commercialization teams have access to single source truth data now? Nick, can you speak to that?
Yeah, I think that's the goal that everyone tries to get to. That's certainly something that we've tried to do as well. So right now we've had the luxury of going through the mastering process from an account perspective, from a prescriber perspective, and from a payer perspective. So we've basically linked 3 or 4 different data sets to come to that, who is that person or that organization we're talking to. So we've gone through that part, and we're building in the MDM process to manage that on an ongoing basis. From a patient perspective, we are tokenizing our data. So, we do have, patient claims data to look at them from a longitudinal standpoint. But where our patients are coming, when they come into our hub, into our specialty pharmacies, or using a copay card, now we'll be able to use a tokenization process to find that patient, to look at their patient journey, and so you get a single source of truth that way. So what we're trying to do is find one prescriber, one patient, one account, and one payer. It's the best that we can come up with right now, and we use that common nomenclature across the board. So everyone calls an account, things along those lines. So really the basics of data, but it takes time. But I think we're getting to that where we're all sort of buying into the story about what the data could provide and what the KPIs are.
Thank you for attending this Fierce Biotech webinar and submitting so many great questions. I'd like to thank our speakers for participating and Lauren IO for presenting today's webinar. This webinar has been recorded. You'll be able to access the recording within 24 hours using the same audience link that was sent to you earlier. Thank you again for joining, and we look forward to seeing you at future events.